quorum. I believe we do in any case. So
Who is Zoom user?
Zoom user. I believe that's
Yeah,
Mo.
who is that?
I think that might be Mo.
No,
No, that was Bob.
no, Mo.
There's
I
no
bet
more
you-
Zoom user.
I'm a
Bob's,
Zoom-
Would they,
I think it was
it's
Bob's.
right. Oh, it's Bob.
It was,
Okay.
but now he's there. Yeah.
Well, there are 8 of us on, which is good. Linda Pellegrino will not be joining us tonight. She called a little while ago and she's rung out today. So there you go. I don't know about Jen Rhodes, but hopefully. So I'm going to call this meeting to order. It's February 23rd, Wednesday. It's 7:01, I guess, at this point. And thank you all for coming on relatively short notice since we just met last week. The agenda is fairly straightforward tonight and prominently features our town administrator, Charlie Sumner. I hope everyone's had a chance to download the latest version, which came in late this afternoon, of the financial forecast that Charlie produced. There was one updated to the 14th, but this one was updated, I believe, to the 23rd, was it? So
17th, yeah.
17th. So that is the latest and greatest, as I understand it. And
So if I'm understanding this report correctly, then the percentage of increase for the grand total, is that, am I reading that right? 15.89%?
could we wait? Let's hold that thought for a couple of minutes while we just get the minutes and so on, because
Sure.
really we will, I promise, have plenty of time to ask those questions. So having said that, if you've had a chance to look at the meetings that were distributed by Karen for Tuesday, the February 15th meeting, as you'll recall, Charlie did a quick town finance status, and then we went into the departmental operating budget reviews. We reviewed the police, fire, library, DPW, water, not wastewater because there isn't one, started on beach and recreation and the schools. I would be happy to entertain a motion to accept those meeting minutes unless someone
So
has
moved.
Thank you, Stephen.
Second.
Thank you, Kathy. I'll take a roll call vote. Ira?
Yes.
Okay, aye for me. Mo, you weren't at the
I
meeting.
was not present.
So, Bob?
Aye.
Okay. Jeff?
Aye.
Jeff too?
Aye.
Stephen? Oh, Kathy, I'm sorry. And Steve and Kathy.
Aye.
Okay, so
Aye.
that's 7-0 to approve the meeting minutes. Thank you very much. We have basically two major items of business tonight. One is to give Charlie Sumner the opportunity to walk us through the financial forecast that's been being discussed in a number of venues over the last few weeks and updated, I guess, every few days because it goes through revisions and may still. And then we have what I will hope will be a brief review of a couple of the departmental operating budgets, primarily the Shellfish Department and the Marina. Stephen is the liaison to those departments. And if Jen Rhodes were on, I would ask her, but I think Jeff Behrens can probably speak to, we had questions about 4 of the smaller departments' use of part-time and seasonal work. And we have some more description on the questions that we asked about that in terms of number of hours, number of people, and so on. I will say in general, and this is also true of the DPW, I got a note from Linda earlier today that salaries are up. Competition is fierce for part-time and seasonal workers. I gather the town has now approved a $17 an hour rate in order for us to be competitive with Stop and Shop, for example. And a lot of what we're seeing, at least in that domain, is a function of the market. So we can get to that later. I would ask you at this point to open, if you have it, your current version of the financial forecast that was sent around by Charlie, and we can have at it. And again, this was financial core forecast. The title is amended 223, but at the top it says draft number 3, 217-22. So I'll give you a moment to get at it. Okay, Charlie, would you like to start with some, I suppose, introductory comments about what we're looking at and how we should interpret it?
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Sorry I sent that out so late. I do update this every other day, and I updated it for the select board packet tonight, and I just forgot to send it to Fred. But it's not substantively different. It's really, I don't even quite remember what I changed, but it wasn't substantive. Anyway, so I'll just go back a little bit. We've already talked about this a few weeks ago when we had the joint meeting, but I have changed the formatting of this to kind of sort of lead us through a discussion about what ifs, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Anyway, the first page, as I've talked about in the past, is all about our local receipts, our revenues. Now, I think the only two areas that I think are any different than I talked about a while back is if you look under section B, where it says estimated receipt categories, and there's two items there. There's state aid and miscellaneous town receipts. And I will call your attention to state aid. If you look at FY22, state aid was at $343,000. I'm going to round if that's all right. $343,000, and it went up to over $417,000. So that's actually, relatively speaking, a remarkable increase in 1 year. I mean, usually when I do projections for state aids for any community on Cape Cod, you know, I usually use 1%, sometimes 2%, but you can see that it's up, I think, over $70,000. Most of that's related to funding for Chapter 70, which is educational aid. So you know what? I look at it as like Wellfleet deserves some more money in state aid, and this was a wonderful year to get it. So that was different and good news. And then the other one I wanted to mention, but also under section B, estimated receipt categories at miscellaneous town receipts. And you can see in FY22, we used sort of every can in the cupboard to balance the budget and set the tax rate. So you can see I was using $2,814,000 we used. And in FY23, I've reduced that to $2,532,000. And the reason and then you can see the next year, in FY24, I reduced it again. So anyway, in FY23, I've taken that, I've reduced estimated receipts by 10%. And then in FY24, I've reduced it by another 5%. And so the idea is you don't want to use all your estimated receipts. You don't want to use 100% of your estimated receipts, because if you have a revenue shortfall, if you have a problem, like when you had to close, I believe, White Crest Beach, you want to have capacity to absorb a loss. And then the other thing is, getting down to using 80 to 85% for your local receipts is just a good practice, because that's how you create free cash. You know, your receipts come in higher than your estimates. Your actuals come in higher than your estimates, and you end up with free cash. And then I think that you know, if we could get into that practice of using 80 or 85%, then you can start to use free cash for special projects and for equipment replacement going forward. So anyway, that's a major change in what you originally saw. I don't think anything substantive changed in section B, which is just a myriad of different other available funds that we use to balance the budget. I think those numbers are largely the same as you saw when we met in a joint meeting with the selectmen. So anyway, that first page is revenue. So you can see we have $28,772,000 to play with as we look at spending plans for FY23. Can I go to the next page, or are there any questions on the first page?
Just one quick question. Could you just quickly go through what the components of miscellaneous town receipts are?
Yeah. Yeah. So in the spreadsheet that I have some backup documentation. And one of the tabs says, when you have a chance to, when you're bored, to look at it, is it says tax recap revenues. And that's the form that we send into the state. And so that includes, I won't talk about all of them, but I'll talk about a few of them. But anyway, it's motor vehicle excise, it's meals tax, it's room occupancy tax, it's cannabis tax, and then it's solid waste fees, and I'm trying to look at, oh, you know, fees that we charge for building permits and conservation permits. All of those revenues would be in that category. And then fines and forfeits, investment income, licenses and permits, and then Medicare reimbursement. So it's a real catch-all of local revenues that we get that I have the detailed built out. And I go back, and that document, when you want to take a look at it, I think I go back, yeah, I go back to fiscal 2019. I show actuals for 19, 20, 21, and then estimated receipts for 22 out to 27. So I try to trend with that. So anyway.
Okay, thank you.
I think it's nice for you to look at those revenues each year and really look at actuals compared to estimates, you know, in the future.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to be clear that it did not include beach revenue.
That's correct. Beach revenue is on that front page as its own standalone item. Okay. Yeah, you're right.
All righty.
Ollie, can I ask a question on this, on the preparation of this? Is this financial forecasting tool, are you pulling this from Vadar, or is this from is this a standalone, like is this form actually feeding real numbers into it? Besides, I mean, I understand it's a forecast, but when we get up and running, will it be able to feed our real numbers into it, or is that a separate program?
The Department of Revenue has a financial forecast document that they have generated, but it's really, it's a little too complex, and I'm worried that it won't be maintained. This is actually a system that I developed in Brewster. I used it for Lisa Sauvé, and I used it forever. And I feel like it's simple. And if I can do it, anybody can do it. But it's a good yardstick. I will say the backup documentation that I have for the operating budget and the recap sheet and the cherry sheet, that does feed off some other state documents. So,
okay.
But I did kind of create this myself. I modified it for Wellfleet.
No, it's great, because it is really, it's very understandable for us, but I just want to make sure, like, my thing is going forward is this is your.
Oh, you froze. Yeah.
Kathy, you just,
looking at budgets where,
there you go.
where, you know, sorry. Thanks.
Yeah, and I would
We
say,
didn't hear a word you said.
oh, sorry, yeah.
Your audio froze for a moment, Kathy.
Oh, I'm sorry. It was probably my most brilliant point.
As always.
You know, I would say, Kathy, too, I would be glad just as a volunteer, you know, one, I'm glad to work with the new town administrator in the finance team going forward. And even next year when they, you know, I would say, you know, I used to put this together in Brewster in the late fall. So you could start talking of the finance committee and the select board just before the holidays can start talking about, you know, sort of a global look at what's going on. But I'd be glad to come back in the fall and volunteer to help the new town administrator and town accountant update this for the new fiscal year. And once they do it once, it's easy.
Well, I think this is awesome because when we started talking to you as the audit task force, you know, we were talking about, we'll get to forecasting, and we're finally here. So that just the progress since you've been here has been amazing. And again, I appreciate it and look forward to, you know, ironing it out and moving forward for Wellfleet. So thank you, I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. And just to, this is a digression, but I think it's finance, so it's okay. But, you know, we have hired a town treasurer. I'm very close to hiring a town accountant, which I'm pretty excited about. I'll announce this soon. And the same thing, I've reached out to the town of Brewster because they have Vadar, and they will provide mentoring and training to the new financial staff in Wellfleet, and the folks in Brewster are they've been there for a long time. They're really good. So I think that's the idea. Bring on people, train them, but backstop them. So
that's huge. Thanks.
Mo, you have a question?
Yeah, in that same regard, what has happened to the concept of joining forces with Eastham in terms of financial planning and operations?
yeah, well, I continue to talk to Eastham about some options, but it's going to take time. You know, we're going to have to develop an intermunicipal agreement, and it's just something I frankly don't have a lot of time to work on, and nor do they. But we have continued to talk, and I think Jackie Beebe, the town administrator, is going to try to apply for a grant through the state to help, you know, foster that program. But it's not going to happen overnight. And the reality is, you know, as I was really talking to Jackie and Rich Bienvenu about this, Lisa Sauvé, Mary McIsaac, and myself, we are all on, there's a governor on us. We're all retirees. We receive a public pension, and we do have some limits on how much money we can make and how many hours we can work. And so I'm a little, you know, I didn't want to hold off any longer on finding finance people to replace us. But anyway, those talks will continue, but it's just going to have to happen a little bit later.
I have a feeling that we should be involved in those conversations, but that's for another time.
I think it's a good idea. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I even talked to Jackie Beebe about it last week, so we continue to have some conversations.
Do you want to, did you want us to slide down past the revenues or?
Oh yeah, okay, if you're all set, thanks. So I'd like to go to the page, what I call page 2, which is estimate, it says number 2, estimated expenditures. You all there? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, so anyway, this is some good news.
Just before, can I just interrupt real quick before we go there and just concentrate on the line just above it, the number 1, the grand total, and trying to get my a handle on what it is I'm looking at. Looking at the that the numbers in 22 were higher than 23, which are going to still higher than 24. Could you just help me understand what it is I'm looking at here and what those changes are?
The real big change on that is if you look at item number 16, debt borrowing warrant articles.
Yeah.
That's $3,129,000, and that was for all those like the Coles Neck water main extension and all of those Proposition 2.5 overrides. So it's a little apples to oranges, honestly, because I've built in all the overrides at the end here. But since they were approved, I build them in there for FY20.
So we're going to see the ones going forward further down.
Yeah.
That clears up. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that'll be the stark reality that we're going to be talking about shortly.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so anyway, so then if you go into page 2, I start talking about expenditures, and if you look at that, I'm going to stay in section A, operating budgets. So that's the town and the school operating budgets, and then the water and Marina. They're both separate enterprise funds, the way you do business. But anyway, if you look at that town number, it's come down quite a bit by about $270,000 over that document that I presented at the joint budget meeting. So that's kind of good news. And the reason is the elementary school budget. I used 3% when I was doing the forecast when I first presented it to you, because I didn't have the school budgets yet. So I said, okay, let's just stick in a 3% increase. Well, the elementary school budget is actually down by $9,000. I'm rounding over that should say FY22, not 21, by the way, speaking of errors. But anyway, the elementary school budget is down. And it's not down because of enrollment, to my knowledge. It's down because they've had a lot of retirements from staff, and when they hire new staff, they start at a lower pay scale. So the reality is the elementary school budget will be down when you get a chance to look at that closely. And then the Nauset regional school budget is down. Our enrollment has declined by 10 children. So our proportionate share of the budget has actually declined by about $68,000.
Charlie, we reviewed the school budgets at our last meeting, and for that and the tech high school as well.
Oh, good. Yeah. And then as you'll note, then you've noted that the Cape Cod Tech is down as well.
That's right.
Because of enrollment. So it's really because of the school budgets that, when you thought about I'll talk about it in a minute, but I thought the deficit was like $850,000. And when we get down in a minute, you can see it's down to 586. Okay. So you looked at the school budgets. Great.
Yes.
And I should have mentioned on the front page on the water revenues, I hired a water rate consultant, and I've been working with the water commissioners because, the water enterprise fund is heavily subsidized by the town in the range of about $240,000. So I have been working, we've had really constructive conversations with the water commissioners. We've had 3 meetings so far, and we're probably going to require a couple more before we finalize a plan to present to the town. But we are trying to work on those water revenues to deal with that matter. But anyway,
Charlie, I'm sorry. Can I ask you a quick question about that? Under revenues for the Water Enterprise Fund in FY22, there's 0. And so you have $285,000 in FY22. But as you just noted, the $408,000 in FY23 is offset somewhat by the $168 in revenue we got in the revenue area. So the $240,000, I'm assuming, is the difference between the expenditure and the income. Is that fair?
Yeah, and I think my I should show in FY22 the water and Marina enterprise funds. I'll change that. Thanks.
So the deficit wasn't 285,000 in FY22. It was somewhat less than that.
Yeah, it was, I think, a couple $100,000 off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Yeah, it takes a village. Thanks. So anyway, the town budget right now, that's the town budget that you're reviewing with the various departments, boards, and committees. And then, and so then I go into that section B, which is warrant articles for the annual town meeting. And if you take your warrant and you add up every single raise and appropriate article that's on there, on the warrant, that totals, you know, that's everything that everybody wants at the moment. So that totals that $1,359,700. So clearly, you know, in my mind, that's high. And I think we can find ways to maybe find some other revenues, defer some of these projects to some other time, maybe when we have free cash certified. But anyway, that number is what you have facing you today. And that's an area that we should focus our energies on.
What's the 32,857 in fiscal year 2022?
I think that was, I don't have that spreadsheet with me. We did one raise an appropriate article at the June 26th town meeting. I can't remember what it was. I'll check it out and send you a note.
So the line I-49, the 1,359,700 is the appropriate number to compare that to the 3,129,000, which is
no
836, all of the debt borrowing articles from FY22.
Well,
no.
Well, you're right. I mean, some of the capital items at the June 26th, you know, equipment and capital you borrowed for. So some of it is comparable. You're right. Some of it, remember, is the water main project for Coles Neck, which was, I forget how much, but a lot of money. So there's a relationship there, but it's not direct. So
okay. I think it was about 1,000,007, if I recall.
Yeah, that sounds like you're on target. Yeah. So anyway, but right now, you know, everything we did at the June 26th town meeting, every truck, every car, for the most part, was an override and borrowed for 5 years. So yeah, I don't. It's not a. It's sort of a practice. I don't think it's a good practice. So. But anyway, right now, of course, we've had a lot of deferred requests by department heads. So it's sort of all ended up on the table right now, but we've got to attack that number. So, now, you know, I want to, I'll talk about that later, but I'd like to get the money. If I can get free cash certified, I want to use free cash to, put the monies that we use back in the stabilization fund. So that's item number 2. Item number 3, it's just a planning number. We have 4 of our 5 collective bargaining agreements that are set to expire on June 30th, 2022. And, you know, there's going to be some settlement costs. And, but anyway, I just put a planning number in the warrant. That's actually like 4%. So I think it's high.
Sorry, one more quick question on the stabilization fund. Is that the total amount that you want to have in the stabilization fund, or the amount you want to pay back to it?
The amount I want to pay back to it.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly what we took out on June 26, 2021. I think we, if we do this, we'll have about, I think, $950,000 in the stabilization fund. Right, I have that in a memo somewhere.
Okay.
Yep, that's my goal. Number 4 is, the revenues from ambulance receipts. And we would use that to buy a new ambulance. Looks like we'll have enough money to collected in that ambulance account to buy a new ambulance, and also to do a couple of other fire-related projects. I think the paramedic training for new staff and something else. But anyway.
So I have a question on purchasing ambulances. Can you take a loan out as opposed to paying up front?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. We could borrow for a period of time if we wanted on the ambulance.
So wouldn't that help as a debt exclusion because it's borrowing?
Well, even if we borrowed for the ambulance, I wouldn't do it as a debt exclusion. I'd use ambulance revenue, so you have one less increase in the tax levy. And I think the idea that Chief Pauly and I have been talking about is let's reserve ambulance revenues for fire and rescue related expenses. And then over time, you can plan your capital replacements so that you never have to use the tax levy if you manage it properly. I mean, I have to go back to Brewster because that's my life, but in Brewster, every fire engine, ambulance, piece of fire equipment, turnout gear, hoses, everything we did was paid for out of the ambulance fund because we created a long-term plan. So if you want, if we do this right, then we can keep the ambulance and fire equipment off your tax levy. Anyway, that's
I thought the debt exclusion removes it from the levy.
Well, no, a debt exclusion adds it to your levy for the life.
Limit. Right.
Yeah, so it's still, it's saying, okay, you can increase my property tax for the life of that loan, for the principal and interest payments on that loan. So anyway, that's
Roy,
kind of.
I'm sorry, as you go through this, Brad, I would start maybe with the ambulance fund, but it applies to other areas as well. Has there been conversation about increasing the rate at which we drive revenue? For example, if we needed 400,000 from the ambulance fund, by increasing, the charge per run to the hospital or whatever, in order to try to close some of these gaps. I know that with Water Enterprise, we've talked about that a lot.
Yeah. So yes, so we had a meeting with all the department heads last Thursday, I think. I went over the financial forecast with them, and then and we talked about revenues. And I've asked all of the department heads to take a look at, what is our revenue structure compared to the cost to provide service, and then compared to what other towns are charging. Now, the ambulance revenues are largely reimbursements from insurance companies, to person's healthcare plans. So they set rates, but still we should be reviewing those rates every other year to make sure we're maximizing what we can get out of the from the insurance providers. Anyway, all the department heads are going to be looking at their revenues. Now, like most of these revenues, they have to be actuals. It's what is in the account on the day we hold town meeting. So anything that we do to increase our revenues, whether it's building permit fees or conservation fees or, beach parking fees or whatever they might be, will help out next year. They won't help out this year. Okay. Number 6, if you look at your, that's the cable franchise fee program. If you look at your cable bill, there's I think it's a 5.75% add-on on your cable Comcast bill. And that's for PEG, Public Education and Government Access. So that when when you total up all the Comcast accounts in Wellfleet, it's about $140,000 a year. Comcast collects those revenues from you, they send it to us, and we use that to provide cable services. Half of it goes to about half of it goes to Nauset High School for the public access studio over at the Nauset High School, and the other half is used here locally to run our own cable programs.
I'm just in the energy and climate action, the issue came up that as we are starting to see a lifting of the mask mandates and so forth, the desire to be able to have hybrid meetings like our own. And is it possible to be able to use this cable franchise fee so that we could provide the facilities to do that?
Yes, as a matter of fact, last week I signed a contract off the state bid list to buy the necessary equipment to upgrade the meeting room at the Adult Learning Center, the Council on Aging. So there's a gentleman named JP Ludwig. He runs the cable program for Truro, Brewster, Yarmouth, and I think one other time, Wellfleet. So we just went out to bid, and he submitted a proposal. So anyway, I signed a contract. We ordered the equipment. It's going to take 6 to 8 weeks for the equipment to be delivered. And then JP and his crew will install it over there. So sometime in, mid-spring, we'll have the technology to run hybrid meetings from that venue. And I think over time, and so I'll use these monies. We have quite a bit of monies in these, by the way, these cable monies can only be used for PEG programming. They can't be used to pay part of my salary or, buy a truck or something. So we need to make sure that we document that. But anyway,
cable car.
Yeah. Anyway, we have enough money reserved where I could order all the equipment and have it installed. So yeah, we'll be up and running quite soon. So we're pretty excited about it. So, and I think one of the things once we get that done, I mean, I don't know if I'll still be here or not, but what I'd like to do is see the balance in our PEG, our cable franchise fee account. And it's not the best venue in the world, but it would be nice to have one other venue to have hybrid meetings. And maybe we'll look at the basement of the town hall. Well, at least we can have some small programming there. But anyway, we'll worry about that tomorrow. But anyway, yeah, everything's ordered and we're in good shape. Interesting. So the shellfish equipment, $56,000. So the revenues from the shellfish fees are reserved for two purposes: shellfish equipment and the costs, and then propagation. Anyway, this $56,000 is we're using those shellfish revenues to buy the truck, which is, I think, $30,000, to do the repairs that's in the warrant article, one of the warrant articles for the Shellfish beach offices. So that's that. And then they pay the Marina Enterprise Fund $5,000 a year. So anyway, that's shellfish monies used for related shellfish expenditures. Wetlands filing fees. Those are small revenues that we get through conservation permits, and also cemetery revenues. So one of the ideas is we collect money in a perpetual care account for the cemeteries, but we should use that money to offset costs. So you can see I'm using that here. CPA monies, we'll talk about that in more detail later, but you know what those are. And I will tell you that that number is very fluid right now because Lisa, so that's one of the areas. Lisa's on vacation this week, Lisa Sauvé, but she took her CPA documentation with her, and she's going to try to finish reconciling the CPA account before she returns, because she's spent about 20 hours on it already, but we really want to have that done. Anyway, CPA I'll talk about later once Lisa finishes that. Then you go down into section C. We get county, state and county revenues, but we also get an assessment, you know, for the Cape Cod Commission, for Barnstable County, for mosquito control. Those are all built into that tab on the spreadsheet called state cherry sheet charges. So if you want to look at the detail, it's there. And then section C, item 2, we have to appropriate money for overlay. So if we send out a tax bill and Fred files an abatement application because we thought he had a garage on his property, but he didn't, then he gets a tax reduction, and we use the overlay to cover that expense. So anyway, so you can see in the end, our total expenditures are that $30,717,832. So then you go, okay, what does that mean? Well, when you compare that to the revenues on the front page, we have a deficit of $1,946,000. And I broke that into 2 categories. One, the operating budget. And then you can see the operating budget has a deficit of $586,442. And then the capital budget, I've talked about that enough, has a deficit because we don't have any money of $1,360,000. So I'll update this every week. You'll see changes all the time. But if it's okay, Fred, I'm going to jump to the last page.
Yeah, can I just want to ask one quick question though about what we're calling an operating budget deficit. As I said before, we're hearing from almost every department that there are recruiting and salary and compensation issues. And that applies to full and part-time personnel in proportion to different departments. Where, and on top of that, materials seem to be going up as well. In some cases, because the providers of consulting services and materials are experiencing the same staffing and cost issues and passing them on to us. What do we mean when we call it a deficit as opposed to just kind of a cost of doing business? This is what's going on now in the world, and we have to pay these salaries and whatnot. As a finance committee, we're going through operating budget reviews right now, and it's really difficult to say, oh no, you don't need those 2 people, or you don't need those extra, personnel or whatever, if you trust your department heads to be doing a good job.
Yeah,
how do we evaluate it?
It's sort of a callous term, I guess, calling it an operating budget deficit, but it just means that our expenditure plan, our spending plan exceeds our revenue capacity. And so the alternative is we ask voters for more money. Well, one, we look at the budgets. You might find some venues in there where you could cut some money. I don't know. I don't think there's a lot of opportunities there, but there might be a few. Certainly in my mind, it would be challenging to find $586,000 to cut out of that budget without decimating your program.
For example, we found $50,000 in the DPW budget last time that was a contingency or emergency number. Said, well, maybe not.
Yeah, maybe not this year. You're right. I think that's what I mean. There's some opportunities to reduce this. I don't think it's going to be easy to eliminate it.
Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, that's just sort of the black and white of the numbers without caring about the programs. So then that last page, this is really what I wanted to, this is new. You haven't seen it before, I don't believe. So what I've tried to do here is to show you what the implications are for each of these major policy decisions. So if you cut out that, if you reduced expenditures, to cut out that $586,000 budget deficiency, if you eliminate the $1,360,000 in equipment and project requests, then that section A is the reality. So if you look at section A there, it says A, estimated FY23 property tax levy and rate. And so you can see that, and this is a blended rate. I know you guys have the residential exemption, but I just kept it simple. But anyway, your blended rate would go from 744 to 765, or a 2.8% increase. And for an average home, which the average home in Wellfleet is $619,000, it would cost that homeowner $129 in increased taxes. And so this number kind of makes some sense, because remember, you can legally increase your property tax levy by 2.5% plus the new growth, new construction in town. So that's where this 2.8% comes from. Okay, so if you cut out all these other costs and just stuck with what you could legally raise on your tax levy, it'll cost people about $129 for a home valued at $619,000. So I'm going to keep going if I don't see a hand raised. Now, then what I've done in this section B is I've started to create a menu so you can sort of analyze what this means to taxpayers and homeowners. So what I basically said, okay, so if you know, it's really your community and the select board and the finance committee and ultimately town meeting's decision. But if you say, okay, we don't want to cut town services to the level that we would have to, that would be item number 1, town and school general override. And you can see that number 586,442 comes from the previous page. It just slides over on the formula. So you'd have to raise that money on your property tax levy as an override. And then you can see, okay, that would be another 2.74% increase in your tax rate. And that would cost people $129.81. So it's pretty close to that override, that number above, you can see. But anyway, that's what that override would cost you if you owned a home of that value. Now, then I kept building this chart, and I said, okay, if you say to me, Charlie, we have to spend $1,360,000 on all of the requests that are on the warrant. They're all important. They're critical to the town. They can't wait. Well, you're going to have to get an override to pay for those. And once again, slide across, that would cost an average homeowner $301 to fund all of those things, because we have no other revenues to pay for it. And of course, we have number 3, we have a request by the police department to add 2 police officers. I'm not going to keep going. You see the way this works. Then we have a request by the fire department to add 2 new firefighters. And next, number 5, we have a request by the fire chief to replace a fire engine. I put that $745,000. I think I built that in here as a borrowing for 20 years at 4%. Now, Chief Pauly, by the way, reached out to me last Friday and thinking, you know, Charlie, if we do in fact create the ambulance receipts reserved account and commit to retaining that for fire equipment, he's thinking about removing this request from the annual town meeting warrant, holding off a little bit until we could collect some more money in the ambulance account. And let's face it, summer is a big revenue generator for the ambulance operation, and then bringing that back. And maybe he would use that, as someone talked about earlier, to pay the principal and interest on that, i.e. not have an override. I think that's a good idea. Chief Hurley's gonna kind of look at his projects and his revenue projections, and we'll come back and talk to you about that further. But that might go away. We'll see. And then, of course, the last one I have is we have to install a new fire suppression system at the Wellfleet Elementary School. Chief Pauly can talk about the need for that. He's the fire professional. But anyway, I did the same thing. I think I did a 20-year borrowing at 4%. So that's why you can see while it's borrowing at $2.2 million, the annual expense would be the $187,280. And then you can follow across and see what the tax impact is. And then that section C, I do have a number of requests from department heads. They're modest relative to everything else we've been talking about, 7 through 11. And I just showed those as separate requests. And if we wanted to fund some or all of those, we'd have to build that into the general override. But since they're new programs within those budgets, and I wanted the budget to reflect the same level of service, for the most part, I left those as outliers. So, but anyway, so the problem is if you do everything, if we do everything that I've included in here, and this is early in the process, you could see it would add $732 to a homeowner of that average home. So it's a lot.
Charlie, I'm going to express my ignorance here, if you don't mind. The school fire suppression system is clearly a debt exclusion. So we're borrowing $2.2 million, but we're paying it out over 20 years with a tax implication of $41 a year to the average homeowner who has a home worth $618,000 and change. The 1.3 million override is not an annual charge for 20 years. Is that correct? Or am I missing something?
Well, what I'm sort of suggesting to you is, one, I think we should try to get that number down to more like $750,000. We should look at these, that's my recommendation to the selectmen when I get back into their meeting is going to be, I think it's too much. I think we should get that number down to a reasonable number. But what I would like to do is get a general override that goes year after year after year, because this year you got to replace this equipment and fix this roof and paint that building. Next year, you're going to have the same thing. They're just going to be different items. So I think we need to come up with what is the right number to reserve for equipment and capital repairs and appropriate that as an override. And then you won't have to go back to the voters every year. You can manage within that number. So I'm trying to encourage you to annualize what is really an annual cost. But I think it's way too high right now.
But if I add up all the overrides, the police, fire, general override, and the capital improvement fund override for FY23, it comes to over $2 million. However, once you've raised that money, you've paid for it at least in FY23.
Yep, and it's in your base for FY24.
So Fred, can I jump in?
Yes, please.
So Charlie, I think Fred is another piece of the financial puzzle that we haven't had access to. Is we, in the operating budget, we don't ever see what our debt service coverage ratios are, because I think that would be good to know. I know what Fred is saying. but we have things that are being paid off and then rotating. So is there a document that you would produce for the finance committee in your professionalism that would have our debt service coverage, so we know when we're taking on new debt, can we wait 2 years till this is paid off?
Yes. Yeah, I'll send you, Mary has updated the debt budget and projected it out over the life of the loan. So I think it's a good point, is that the current authorized debt is going to go out in decline.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll get you that document.
Sorry, Fred, I think that's why I jumped in there, because you're talking about short-term, you're talking about the difference between short-term and long-term debt.
And also, I think
there. So there's
also, I think we're talking about establishing an ongoing mechanism to pay for future capital requirements and whatnot, and also the cost of living, the cost of doing business, and potentially setting monies aside for large projects that is exclusive of the immediate need to reconcile the budget this year.
Yeah.
And I just want to make sure that, I mean, it's not apples and oranges. I mean, at the end of the day, we want to avoid being in this situation again, but it is to some degree, because you could argue, okay, if I have $2 million that I need to pay for everything this year, if the town were to say, I want to pay for all that stuff, you could take on short-term debt, pay it out over 4 or 5 years. It wouldn't look like 2 million. It would look like 400,000 a year for 5 years or whatever. But that wouldn't cover the other stuff, putting money aside for the future. It would just pay off this year's, unless I'm missing something.
No.
No, it's the difference. It's the cost between debt service for long-term and short-term debt.
Yeah.
So the 2.2 million won't cost us 2.2 million in this year, but it will raise that tax burden by that much. So you're not funding the whole, anyway, Charlie, am I right? You're not funding the whole 2.2 million at that point. You're funding your debt service coverage for each year on that. And that's what you've expressed as part of the increased taxes.
Yeah, I think if you look at items number 1 and 2 right now, the totals for 1 and 2 are what, 1,900,000 and
1,897. Yeah.
You know, $1,900,000. I mean, it's high. I think that if we could collaboratively work to get the town general override down to, let's say, $500,000, and then get that capital number down to 7 or 750, it might be more manageable in terms of public perception. And then the nice thing about getting that spending capacity is then you can reserve those capital funds for future capital costs. You have to have the discipline and have a policy. And then you're not going to be going for borrowings and having interest costs and having debt, every year having debt exclusions for pieces of equipment. Now, the big stuff, you will, for the fire suppression systems, for new buildings, for large projects, but everyday equipment replacement should be part of your spending plan. And that's what I'm trying to get you to that place. I know it's painful right now, but I think it would be a better foundation.
Well, I totally agree. And I think I talked to you about that about every year. Every year, poor Chief Hurley and Chief Pauly have to stand up and at town meeting and go, we need another cruiser. And people are like, how many cruisers do we have? Well, it's just the equipment replacement. That shouldn't be something that should just be a natural function of the budget every year, to not have to go with hat in hand and ask for the basic services that they need to provide for an equipment replacement. That's always bothered me.
Yeah, and by the way, remember on that front page, I decreased your estimated receipts by 10 and 5% respectfully, because I wanted to start to create free cash on an annual basis.
Yeah.
That's the other thing is we'll also start to create a situation when we certify free cash, which we should be doing in September, October of each year, that you'll also, have some free cash that you could use for equipment and facility repair too. So I think between the two, you'll be in, with the actions of this budget module, you'll be in a really good place going forward.
But I think the thing that jumps out, obviously, is that for less than $2 million of override, we're looking at a $430 increase in the tax base. Whereas for a $2.2 million debt exclusion, we're looking at a $41, 1/10 of that. That needs explaining to people because it presupposes that there is a calculation that we're going to need a certain amount of money in future years, whether it's for capital or for operating increases or special projects that has been calculated, that somebody says, okay, we need a certain amount. We know we need that amount, and this is going to get us there, even though this year we're asking you for almost double, to pay almost double on your tax going forward.
Yeah.
Well,
hey, if you look, all I say to you is if you look at your capital plan, and it's a little weak on the outlying years because it's not that sophisticated yet, you're going to have more costs next year that you're going to have to, if you go with that approach, you're going to have to borrow for.
Yeah. Well, I'm not arguing the point because we're also going to have potentially a sewer system and more dredging. There will be large, expensive projects coming, and it would be nice to have some money set aside to help to pay for them. I'm just saying, as I look at this chart, if I were not on the finance committee and just going, oh my God, you want $731.63 on top of my existing tax, how do I justify it?
Yeah, well, what I keep saying to you is I think we need to get that to a more modest number.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what that is. I don't know your community. I don't, I'm not sure.
It's not that. It's not, that is not going to fly. That's not going to fly.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to show you. Right now, this is everything you got.
Yeah.
And I think it's too much. So, I don't know. I mean, maybe that capital improvement fund, maybe we get it down to 500. I don't know what the right number is, but it would be good to have some number so you can, you're going to have another truck or another building to repair next year and the year after and the year after. So.
Yeah, that's why that debt, that's why the debt schedule would be great to have for the long-term stuff and
yeah, that's a great point. I will get you that. I won't do it I might be able to do it tomorrow. Yeah.
No, don't just, nice. It would be nice to have that. So, yeah.
Can I weigh in with just, I'm having a hard time necessarily connecting all the dots. I can see the big number for sure. I guess I'm reacting that it seems to me that the way we've been running this town for probably forever isn't not working. And we're paying a price now. And I think part of it is, Charlie, you kind of explained to us that in the last fiscal year, we spent more than we brought in. I'd love to just see that number for a start. And then we're looking at this coming year where just to be able to provide the equivalent services, what we're looking at is a number, taking account like what Fred was saying with salaries and yada, 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 that just to be able to have, I don't remember, level funding, I think was how you put it. We have to do a 2.5 override just for that. So we have to pay back what we missed from last year. We've got to pay for what we have for this year. Now I'm talking about capital. And then what you're saying is you can't run a town with this size budget the way we've been doing it. And we have to have some policies, procedures to be able to account for the kinds of recurring ongoing revenue. We're not going to have volunteer cops anymore. We're not going to have on-call fire. And I guess laying it out, and to me, that's the part that we got to explode this. And bottom line, the town is in trouble in a sense that we have an urgency here that I just don't feel is being expressed. I was talking to Fred earlier, and it was sort of like, I remember with Maria, and we were going into the teeth of COVID, and all she kept saying is, it's amazing. We don't have to worry. We don't have to worry. And I kept feeling like we have to worry. And I feel like I was right. And for us to get, I think we have to we're going to have a really big number. I don't know if it's going to be 15.89% or whatever the hell this is. But we got to break this up and be able to explain this and also convey the urgency here, because otherwise we're not going to have our cute little hamlet running the way that it's always been running. Am I wrong? Anyway, I'm just alarmed. I have a bad feeling.
Yeah, you know what? Listen, I just stepped in and learning about your town, and you know, I mean, it's an incredible place, right? You all know that. But you know, otherwise, I look at this operation, and you're going to have 10 or 15 or 20 overrides every single year for, you know, like a police cruiser is not optional in my mind. You know, that's a piece of infrastructure that is essential, that can't be left to an override. I mean, it's just, there's certain basic, you know, I used to always say, like, you know, like in Brewster, they'd be like, oh, you know, you need a general override, Charlie. I used to go for one every 6 or 7 years, and well, let's cut equipment out. And I'm like, no, because the equipment's going to have to be replaced next year. And how are you going to pay for the equipment next year? So if you want to cut the budget, go ahead and cut the budget, cut the services, but don't cut the infrastructure maintenance costs, because they're still out there. So it's really hard, you know. I feel quite badly about even talking about this in this way. But, you know, I do, I really, you know, my whole career is local government, and I care about what we do. And what you do is what we used to do in Brewster. You provide really nice services to people.
Well, it's also a function of what you call a service as well. A town doesn't exist just on police, fire, and DPW. The things that make Wellfleet are the Shellfish and the library and the COA and Pres Hall, and the sense that this is a destination that people want to come to, the beach and the recreation department. Without those, we're a functioning town in a sense, but we're not the town that people want to live in or come to. So there is, I think, in some people's minds, a dividing line between what you spend on what might be termed essential services, and somebody put it recently, nice to have. But nice to have is essential in its own way as well, if you want to have a town that people want to live in.
Yeah. I mean, when I go back to the select board meeting, I'm going to talk about prioritizing these warrant articles and what's the critical ones that we need to deal with this spring, and try to get that number to a more manageable number. And then I think once we do that, then, you know, I wish I had more time here, but then I could really look at that capital plan going out with more detail. But the new person can deal with that. But,
and it's off to the Bahamas.
Fingers crossed, yeah.
Does anybody have more questions for Charlie? I don't want to.
Fred knows my family secrets, so.
Yeah, I know there are other tabs in the document, but I kind of feel like we've gotten a reasonably good overview from revenue to expenses to the debt implications or the tax implications. Is there anything anybody else wants to ask of Charlie? Are there any other tabs that you feel that we need to go through in detail before we get to the operating budget part of our meeting?
We should just keep in mind this isn't a fight. These numbers might change, right, Charlie?
Yeah, I think you should assume they're going to change.
Right. So the only people who can reduce it is the selectmen, because it's their budget that comes to town meeting. Yeah. So why don't you recommend that they start shaving things off?
I will.
All right. Thank you.
I guess you're off the hook, Charlie.
Can I go to my other meeting?
I wish you would.
The
sooner you get to your other meeting, the sooner you get home, in a sense.
Yeah. Thanks very much. And I think that last comment was a really good one with Steve, is that this is early. We still have a lot of work to do. and there's going to be different ideas to make this more manageable. I don't think we can make it go away, but maybe.
Yeah, but I think another thing that people want to realize or might not be aware of it is over the past 2 years, there's been a group of people that have moved into town that really, when they look at the tax, I'm not saying we should go wild, but when they look at the tax rate and the other ones who are showing up at town meeting, they're going to say this is nothing compared to what they're used to.
You're so right.
They might like to vote for, to go and vote for a new police cruiser.
Yeah, I'd like to add on behalf of the Finance Committee, first of all, thank you for giving us the time. But I think I mentioned earlier, and this was true for the capital planning part of our year as well, we are cognizant of the fact that these are fungible numbers, that they are in transition as the town is, and that to some degree, they only exist to the degree that people are willing to pay for them, whether it's a new police cruiser or an extra fireman or whatever. And I think we're I don't want to say we're standing on the sidelines watching the show go by, because we're trying not to do that. We're trying to ask good questions, but asking good questions is only part of the deal. At the end of the day, to Stephen's point, hard decisions will be made by the select board, by the TA, by the department heads about what is possible without killing services or without undermining the ability of the town to function. And we will make our recommendations based on the notion that this is a changing environment or a changing scenario.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Nice to talk to everybody, and I'll come back whenever you want. So.
Thank you, Troy.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well, thanks everybody. The next phase of this meeting is a review of the 2 departments that we didn't get to last time, which be the Shellfish and the Marina. And I see Nancy Chavette is online, which is great. And then I would turn the floor over to Jen and Jeff Behrens to talk through some of the questions that we had left hanging about part-time seasonal workers and their rates, and what a number of the departments that use them extensively are projecting going into the season, and how that's driving costs. So, Stephen, I assume you
Yes, I'm here.
And Nancy's here. So I assume
I figure we should do the Shellfish budget first since Nancy's here, and then we can go on to the Marina.
Yeah. Did you already go to the select board, or are you on hold there, Nancy?
Part 1 is done, and I have to go back and present my budget to them as well tonight.
All righty.
Okay. Thanks for coming. So the way I'd like to approach this is first I'd like to ask, has everybody got an opportunity to read Nancy's budget and the great marketing piece here for the additional budget requests?
Yes, I have.
Okay, so does anybody have any questions of Nancy regarding her budget?
Well, there's kind of 2, right? There's the cultivation side, and then there's the management side.
So are you asking her a question?
I'm going to ask a question. Yes, I'm just collecting my thoughts here.
Okay.
You have 3 full-time personnel. In the budget, it's not broken out exactly what they're paid each, but there is a total number of about, what, 220,000, as I recall, something like that?
Oh, let me look. I definitely don't memorize.
225,303. So the first question I had was, since there was no actual in the budget document this year, does that represent a significant increase from FY 2021, 22, or?
Well, it's a per the WEA union contract, it's 3.5% increase.
Okay.
So, that's something that Charlie has talked about with us as well. When you have a 2.5% proposition 2.5 override, and you have salaries that increase 3.5% a year, we had to fix that. So Anyway, yeah, that's what the union contract is.
Okay, that was my question. And I know you have an extra request for a part-time, it looks to me like a winter, primarily be like a winter warden or assistant.
Yeah, it would be a deputy. What I would love to do is to keep the person who's full-time deputy in the summertime and just put them at part-time in the winter. And that way you provide kind of a year-round job, even though, you know, fluctuating in amount of hours, but that happens in a lot of different places on Cape Cod. It's just, there's a significant amount of work and it's really hard. It's really hard for me to keep up.
Stephen, have you had the opportunity to have this conversation, and do you have any thoughts on it?
I think we can just let her present her budget or whatever else she wants to add to it.
Okay. Well, the last question then I guess is the truck. If I understood Charlie before, that the cost of the truck is going to be offset by funds from the revolving fund. Is that correct?
No, so there's two different funds. There is the Shellfish Fund where revenues have always been collected. So every time that a grant holder pays a fee, you know, their annual license fees, and when shellfish permits are sold, both commercial and recreational, those go into what's called the Shellfish Fund. In 2019, we authorized a shellfish revolving fund for propagation. So it's a revolving fund, and so is the Shellfish Fund. But so the way it is now is all monies coming in that are all revenues collected for shellfish related permitting and fees. There's a split now. 25% goes into the Shellfish Fund, 75% goes into the Shellfish Revolving Fund for propagation. That 75% can only be used for propagation activities, studies of shellfish, anything related to our nursery efforts, etc. The 25% is what before I think the town used to use it for other things, but you're actually not allowed to use it for other things. It has to be used as well for shellfish related expenses. This is where the building rehab costs that I'm hopefully splitting with Suzanne to the tune of $21,000 each, and the truck at 30 grand, I believe, both of those will come out of the Shellfish Fund. So both of those CIP projects come out of revenues that are collected by the Shellfish Department via the sales of permits and grants.
Okay. So as I recall, we did recommend the truck and the sharing of the building of the building when we did the capital improvement plan. So really, from an operating perspective, all we're really looking at tonight is the extra person.
Yeah, I mean, well, you have my budget, right? Which I basically, you know, except for the increase, you know, there was an increase, which it sounds like you're going to talk about later. You know, yes, I did bump up our seasonal staff wages. And then, of course, ours get bumped up. So that was the increase in our budget. And then the 179, you know, all of our operating expenses, those have remained the same. I did not increase those at all. And then for the 180, line 180, which is our propagation, now, you know, ever since the first year that we've used it, $40,000 gets taken out of the revolving fund for propagation, leaving only $6,000 coming out of taxpayer revenue, if you will. I'm just going to kind of stay that course for right now until, you know, my goal would be to build up that shellfish revolving fund for propagation in such a way that we might be able to take in a sustainable way, you know, larger expenses from that in the future. Because one of the things that you are allowed to do is to pay for a salary, as long as you can also pay all of the benefits associated with that salary. So it might take my entire tenure here to do that with the revolving fund, but wouldn't it be great if one salary could be taken out? And I know that Chatham and Barnstable both do that. But, you know, it's going to take us a while to get there, but that's kind of like a big picture vision where then it would always be coming out of revenues that the department takes in, not from taxpayers.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for Nancy? on the budget.
Can I make a statement?
Yeah.
I just wanted to go back to my original statement when we started the budgets last week and just say, Nancy, I want to make sure that you totally understand my position, but I am not at this point in favor of adding any additional personnel, just because we are trying to make up cash that we don't have from the past 3 years and then stabilize this going forward. So for any and I don't want to say that in a condescending way, non-essential, but your department, you know, it's not that somebody left and we're replacing something. So I am not, I'm not in favor at this point of, you know, I'm doing my want and need, and you have a very different, I'm sure, outlook on that because it is your department. I can't vote for additional, I can't support the additional person at this time. And that's what I'm going to say.
I understand your position. And, you know, if you want me, if others on the board would like to hear some of the reasoning why I feel it's essential, I'm happy to share that. If you want more information.
I think that'd be useful for sure. If you could.
Okay. Yeah. So things have changed in the shellfish industry a lot in the past 10 years, but certainly in the past 5 as well. In Wellfleet, since 2012, it's grown exponentially. So in these last 10 years, there's been a lot more oysters produced, a lot more clams coming out of the harbor, and that requires a lot more oversight. So even though this has been a 3-person staff for a very long time, the demands on the department have been steadily increasing, and there's new regulations that we're required by the state to uphold. You know, the past 10 years, Vibrio has come into play, and that is a very serious public safety issue. So there's a lot of things that happen out on the flats that need 100% attention, and then there's no time left to do all the paperwork that's accumulating. We have, you know, over 100 farms running out there. And each time you do something with a farm, you have to document it. And it's unsustainable. And things aren't getting done. Things are falling through the cracks. And, you know, I'm getting called to task at the select board for it. So, you know, I need to be able to make sure that my department performs to the expectations that are being put on it by the state, by the town. And it's been a real struggle. And I guess if you have specific questions, I could tell you, but one is public health and safety. One is that we need to be out there. And we have not just an intertidal fishery at low tide, but we also have boats at high tide. And so we need to be able to be available for inspections at any time. And so every time that you're out in the field, you know, no problem gets solved in the office. You don't hear things in the office. A warden has to be out on the flats. And then that can be 5 or 6 hours of my 8-hour day. And then I have 2 hours left to do paperwork. When I was out on medical leave, all I did was paperwork because I couldn't go out on the flats, and I'm still behind. So it's just a different world in shellfishing than it used to be. And I am compelled, you know, a very driven person, and I'm compelled to do my best, and I like to do it all. And the requirements are that I do it all. I really can't get around the cracks. I haven't produced a monthly report for the entire 2021. Not one monthly report submitted to the town. Something had to fall through the cracks. Maybe that's not important. That's fine with me, but I don't think the select board might think that. That's just like a silly example. You know, it's not anything I'm concerned about, but other things like documenting Vibrio, and documenting all the things that are going on with grants, it's not something that I can cut corners on, and just a part-timer year-round would be really helpful. You know, to add that, because I do have a little bit more help in the summertime, but to get that assistance in the winter. January and February are some of our most busy months. We have permit renewals. Every single permit has to be checked for domicile. Every single permit has to be checked that they have a state harvesting card. So January, and then we do first time permit holder orientations. And it's just January and February can be some of the most busy months in the office. I could go on and on, but I don't want to bore you to tears.
Yeah, Jeff.
Any suggestions of, I mean, we just had a session with Charlie, any suggestions on how we might be able to generate like, the $17,000 in additional revenue to pay for this extra person?
Well, yeah, I mean, I have a couple of ideas. One was to, so there's obviously, we all know that there's been accounting problems. So I don't have a clear idea of what's in the Shellfish Fund and what's in the Revolving Fund for propagation, because the Revolving Fund was started in 2019. And so I believe the first, I get confused with fiscal years and everything, but in 2020, it was the first year that it was used. And that's when we went from, we had 3 different accountants basically that year. So I'm still working with Lisa Souvet to get a handle on what's in the Revolving Fund for propagation. If that's doing well, then I could take the $6,000 out of that, and then we could, borrow from Peter to pay Paul. You wouldn't be putting it towards the 6,000 on budget line 180. There's 6,000 right there that could go over for the 17.
Do we have any flexibility on the permit fees or any of the?
Sure. I mean, that's definitely something that I bring to Shellfish Advisory as my first step every year. And this year they did not want to increase fees. I think people are worried about just people coming out of a pandemic. So they did not want to do that. However, the town administrator has encouraged all of us to look at how we might be able to do it and to do comparisons across other towns. I did that a couple of years ago and brought it to the Shellfish Advisory Board, and they still didn't go for it. But I could, that's a body of work that I could take on again with some administrative assistance because it's really hard to find time to do all this. But
I would say this to Jeff's
I'd like to point something out here. The Shellfish Advisory Group, they don't dictate to you what you set for fees. It's not their job.
They don't. They're advisory. Absolutely, right. Stephen. So, I totally agree. But it doesn't give me a reason to go and it's better for the select board if they advise positively. But now that the town administrator is directing staff to do this, then I'm assuming that the select board is going to be reviewing every fee that they've got on paper,
So how many recreational licenses are there? Do you know roughly?
How many do we sell each year?
Yeah.
Oh, let's just say conservatively 850.
So 850. I'll just say this anecdotally.
To 1,000, depending.
Let's say 1,000. I would say anecdotally, and this is purely anecdotal, I don't know one person who has a shellfish license who doesn't brag about the fact that they basically get their license worth on one trip to the flats.
It's true.
And I don't know one person who's got a license who goes to the flats one time. Yeah. So my guess is you could probably increase it by a fairly reasonable amount and make up at least part. If you increased it by $10 a license, which still would be extraordinarily reasonable, you'd get about $10,000 back, roughly. So just something, food for thought, I guess.
For sure.
I guess I'd like to take a vote to recommend, the vote, understanding that we have some questions and that a variety of opinions. And sadly, our one shellfish maven here can't vote and has to recuse himself on it because he's...
Fred, I'll make a motion.
Yes, thank you. I have a second.
I move that we recommend the shellfish budget less the $17,075 for the part-time position, with the understanding that, yes, we are aware that the department is growing, but this is a time where we really do need to sharpen the pencil and cut where we can cut. Also, keep in mind, it's the selectmen's budget that comes to town meeting. So my recommendation is just to point out that maybe take a break for this and come back next year with it.
So to
that's
be
my motion.
clear,
Fred, if I could, if I understood you correctly, Fred, you were suggesting raising fees on essentially tourists. We're not talking about the commercial fishermen,
correct.
their licensing. Am I correct?
Yes.
Well, it would seem to me that that would be a very reasonable approach that I would hope would be moved forward. Whether that recommendation comes from us as part of this, I'm not sure what the protocol would be, but I would vote to move it forward with an assumption of raising some revenues.
My motion was to
commercial
recommend
people, if I may finish,
less.
from the non-commercial fishermen is what I would recommend.
All right. So Stephen does have a motion on the floor. It hasn't been seconded yet, but
I would second that.
so just to be clear, if you vote against this motion, you are voting for Nancy's budget with the inclusion of the part-time
Position.
worker that she's positing. If you vote for this motion, you are voting for Nancy's budget without that position being recommended.
So I
And
think
we would
It's
then
a little bit inverted, but I want to be clear what we're voting for here.
I think you need two votes, Fred, if I'm not mistaken, that we need to vote first on Stephen's article, and then if Stephen's amendment doesn't pass, you can take up the full budget.
Right.
sounds right.
So Stephen, you're proposing an amendment?
No, I'm proposing that we recommend the budget minus the $17,075.
So
Okay,
there's,
that's how.
So it is kind of technically an amendment, but it's not really.
but you
Yeah,
can
that's
just
how I
say
understood.
but you just say a dollar amount minus the 7.5.
Minus the
17,500.
additional.
$17,075.
Yeah. So whatever the dollar amount is, that's what you're voting.
Well, it doesn't work that way exactly because the $17,075 is an additional budget request. The
Right.
budget stands as it is. This is an additional budget request. I would think that if anything, we would vote on the budget as it stands and then do a separate vote on the additional budget request.
No, because it's all part of the same
It's all
budget.
part of the
that we're
same
considering.
budget. Yeah.
Okay.
It hasn't been included in the budget, though. The budget numbers that you have do not include the $17,000.
That's right. So if you vote for the budget less 17,000, you're taking out something that's not even in the budget.
That's a really good point. Thank you, Fred.
So
Oh, how can you word that? I wouldn't say.
well, what I would suggest is that we vote up and down on the budget as it stands, and then do a separate vote on the additional budget request, because that's clean. That way you say, yes, I like the budget
Can I
as it stands.
make that motion then?
Well, I want to see if Stephen will withdraw his motion so that we can separate it into two votes.
So moved.
Thank you. So Mo, are you going to, what I'm going to do now is entertain a motion to vote on the budget as it stands, and then we will take a separate vote on the extra position.
So
Okay.
moved.
And I'll second.
All right.
Clarification is as it stands is without the additional money for the.
Correct. That is
Okay.
correct.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear.
Yes, I want to be clear too. And I think we're clear. So the budget is as it stands in the budget book, which does, and then there is a separate page for an
Yes,
additional
Fred,
budget.
we've got it.
Good. I just want to be sure. That's all.
Yeah.
Ira, so this is the vote for the budget itself.
Aye.
I vote aye. Mo,
Aye.
Jeff Tash,
Aye.
Jeff Behrens, Kathy,
I,
Dale. I'm Stephen. I'm sorry.
Aye. Aye.
Jen Rose.
Aye.
Okay. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think that's 8, if I'm not mistaken. 8-0 to recommend the budget. So now we are going to take a separate vote to recommend or not recommend the inclusion of a additional budget request for, and it's line A2, a part-time personnel for $17,075 and a line B5 for a telephone addition of $300. They're together. So I think that, you know, we can vote on this as a separate additional request, and the select board can work out if they want to.
Okay, so I move that we approve the additional budget request less line number A2, account description S&W part-time personnel amount $17,075.
Okay, can I have a second on that, please?
Second.
Okay, so just to be clear again, if you vote for the motion, we are voting.
Everybody understands here.
Well, I just want to be
We're all
sure.
listening.
I'm not sure I understand.
Well, this is for the record. This is for the record. This is a public meeting. So we're voting basically to approve $300 line B5 and exclude line A2 $17,075. If you vote yes, that's what you're voting for. If you vote no, then we are by default voting for the entire additional budget request of $17,075 plus $300. Okay.
And just to make it perfectly clear, can we make a recommendation in there to raise the fees on the
No, we cannot.
No,
we
we
can-
cannot.
That's
Not what we
outside
do.
of this whole thing.
We can make an ad hoc recommendation, which I promise we will do, to consider raising the fees.
I
because
can't
that's
believe you
part-
didn't use the word caveat, Fred.
What's that?
I can't believe you didn't use the word caveat.
I'm sorry.
No,
I love that word so much. Okay, so
Can we just do a simple vote for this additional budget request?
no. That is not how this has been framed, and it's
Right.
been
It's been
seconded.
crazy.
Well, crazy it may be, but that is how we're voting. We're voting not to. If you say yes, you are voting not to include the 17,000 and to include the 300. If you vote no, you're voting to include it all. Clear? As clear as it needs to be. Woody, what's your vote?
Yes.
So, okay. Mo? Oh, no, I vote no.
No.
Jeff Tash.
No.
Jeff Behrens.
No.
Kathy.
Yes.
Stephen.
yes.
Jen.
No.
All right. So we have voted 5-3 to essentially approve the additional budget request for a part-time personnel for the Shellfish Department.
Don't you have to do a motion failed and then do a revote? You could, I mean, technically, yes, you should, but we don't need to.
I would be surprised if it would be any different, but if anybody feels that we have to do a revote with motion failed, I'm happy to do that. Otherwise, can we just like move forward?
Yeah.
Can I ask one quick question, or hopefully?
No,
quick?
Nancy's got her hand up. I'm going to recognize.
No, let Jeff go first.
I was just wondering, is now that we've had the vote, is it possible to ask Bob for his opinion?
No, it is not. Bob has to recuse
That
himself.
would be
on-
deliberating, yeah.
on all
that's
issues,
not
yes.
appropriate.
Sorry,
You can meet
So-
him at the Dunkin' Donuts.
good idea. Nancy?
I would like to ask Nancy one thing. I forgot to get my license. Can I still get my license?
Your wild commercial fishing permit,
Yeah.
you'd have to make a hardship, you'd have to meet the hardship exemption. I'd be happy to speak with you about it.
Okay.
Oh, it's a good thing you recused yourself, Bob.
Is that why you raised your hand, Nancy? I mean,
No, I had no idea.
is there something you want to say?
Bob, come and talk to me about it because I think I know why you need it. Is it fair for me to now, so I just like wrote down so that, because Shellfish Advisory is also going to look at my budget. So is it fair for me to say to Shellfish Advisory that the Finance Committee approved the Shellfish Department's budget 801 abstention, and they approved the additional budget request 531.
Yes, that is fair. And I would also communicate, I think it's the sense of the finance committee that you should move heaven and earth to
Increase
try to find a
fees.
way to increase fees and raise the revenue to pay for this position.
With the caveat,
on
Okay.
non-commercial fishing, on
Thank you.
non-commercial fishing, if I may.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. I
Thank
appreciate your
you.
time and
Thank you,
the
Nancy.
collaboration and the discussion.
Yeah, we appreciate
thank
what
you.
you do. Thank
yeah,
you.
thank
Thanks.
you.
Okay, bye.
Stephen, would you like to speak to the Marina budget?
Well, does anybody have any questions
I know.
about the Marina budget?
Oh, it's all level funded and nice and even, right?
Right. So when I spoke to Will, because he's on vacation, I just asked him if there was anything he wanted me to point out. He did say that he is budgeting a little bit more for training. And this might come into play with the new police reform bill. So, but I mean, I don't see anything. The budget looks good to me.
Nothing popped out at it for me. He's not requesting any new people, right?
Well,
No,
then I would
there's
be
no
happy
need
to
to-
entertain a motion to approve the Marina enterprise budget.
I'll
So
make that
moved.
motion.
Oops.
Second,
Second,
Woody?
Aye.
I say aye. Mo?
Aye.
Jeff Tash?
Aye.
Jeff Behrens?
aye.
Kathy? Stephen?
Aye.
Bob, I'm sorry, did I jump over you? Bob?
Yes, you did.
Sorry.
Aye.
Okay, and Jen?
Aye.
Okay, 9-0. The Marina Enterprise, thank you very much on that. Our last bit of official business having to do with the operating budgets. I'd like to turn the floor over to Jen and Jeff Behrens.
So
Were
I
you
can
able-
just share. I can share quickly that, and this was partially my fault. That I don't have. I know we wanted more information, and I don't have that information because I'm still trying to reach out with Suzanne and Becky. But I hope to have a response by the end of the week, and I'll make sure I get you that information, and I'll send an email to everybody with an update.
Okay, I know Jeff was able to get a very terse little spreadsheet, I think is.
Yeah, am I allowed to show a spreadsheet on this, the sharing thing? I don't know how that works with the meeting lines and all that. I can just show it if that's helpful.
You know how to share, Jeff?
Yeah.
You should be able to just pull it up on your screen and share it.
Yeah, no, that's good.
There you go.
So this goes across, several of the hourly departments, sort of line by line, what people were paid in 22 and the estimate for 23. This is one I created. So my little estimate was about 60 grand of additional cost associated with $2 to $3 an hour in most cases. And there's one new position, I guess, that was being brought in. Then the other sort of document that, let me pull it up. Each program hours, hold on, sorry. Which came, here we go. So this is a little bit lower, $45,000. And this was just kind of a higher level summary in terms of the number of hours last year, and then assuming $3 an hour increase across the board gets to 45,000. So it's my little back of the envelope based on a little more detailed data, and then this higher level estimate with the two that I saw that Suzanne sent over, or she sent this one over, and then separately she sent the other one over, and I added the columns with the detail. And that goes across recreation, beaches, and.
Oh, does it include recreation? Does Suzanne's
Yes.
chart?
Let me go back to the other one.
Because the other chart also includes COA and health and conservation. Is that right?
Right. It had, yes.
I didn't realize they had one spreadsheet for rec, beach, and the other two.
Well, I don't know if there's COA in here, but
Well, there's definitely rec stuff here. So this looks great.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, I'm having trouble looking. 22 and 23 are.
22 is the amount that was paid for each of those roles last year. 23 is the
I see the
estimate.
22, 23 at to the right or.
Oh yeah, I was just playing around. This was like guessing a total amount. This is just guessing here. So I'm guessing the number of dollars an hour increase for each of these roles. If the range was 15 to 17, they got 14 last year. I'm guessing they'll get around $2 an hour more. And that's how I just went through and did my sort of called Jeff's back of the envelope reality check, which was again a little higher.
And that definitely explains their increases in their budgets. I mean, if they're increasing rates, $2 an hour, that's where your increases are.
So let me ask the two of you: Are you confident that the increases that we saw in the budget that we questioned for part-time and seasonal work is rationalized by those numbers? There's no significant outlying amount that we're not recognizing at this point?
Yeah, I didn't see anything.
I agree. I agree with Jeff.
Okay. We did not take a vote on recommending beach, recreation, COA, and health and conservation last time because we had questions about the part-time and seasonal rates and hours and whatnot. Does anybody feel like they haven't got the answer that they were hoping to get as a result of Jeff and Jen's work, or do you have more questions? Because I would, if we feel that this satisfies at least that set of questions, I would welcome a vote on all four of those budgets, since I don't think we had any other issues that I recall.
So here's what I would caution about is these are, again, these are over 2.5 increases, and we understand what it is. And I just am very leery that
I think we lost her.
Is she there?
You froze there, Kathy.
Let's
Are you
vote
back?
before she gets on.
I've been freezing all night. Am I back on?
Yeah, you
go
are.
ahead. What did you say, Stephen? Vote before I get back on?
Yes.
You might have said that. It's possible.
All right, we'll talk about that later.
Well, look, here's the caveat. Get in before we take the vote.
So there's nothing extraordinary about the budget other than the increases and so it's level funded basically other than the increases in price. So we don't really have to, if we want to continue the services, we have to vote for that. But
it appears to be the case. We're not seeing a significant number of new. Oh, actually, Jen, a quick question. There was a typo in the budget that said something about 480 workers in the rec department.
No, I think it's 48.
48.
And that's all their those are all their part-time summer counselors. That's their part-time rec staff. That's all a lot of those are part-time employees.
And that dovetails with what last year's requirements were?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, I think the answer to your question is yes, Kathy. It doesn't look there's a significant increase in personnel. The costs, as I understand it, are associated with across the board increases in what people are getting this year in order just to get them to do work. Please correct me if that's not true.
That's absolutely true.
On that basis, I would say we could vote to recommend the budgets just because it's the cost of doing business.
So moved.
I'll
Kathy,
second it.
Okay, I was going to ask Kathy for the second.
I do that all the time. Go ahead, I'm in favor.
All right, Woody.
Yes.
I say yes. Bob?
Yes.
Jen?
Yes.
Jeff Tash?
Aye.
Jeff Behrens?
Yes.
Kathy said yes already. Stephen?
Yes.
Mo?
Yes.
All right, so 9-0 to recommend all four of those budgets. That's rec, beach, COA, and health and conservation. So here's something that you probably do or do not know. Town meeting is getting pushed back, go figure. The exact date has not been established, but it looks like it's going to be sometime in June. And as a consequence of that, the urgency for us to do pre-warrant stuff and whatever has diminished somewhat. We're not under any great urgency in March to get all our articles voted on, I don't believe. I'm fairly confident actually that's true. I don't even know if the warrant will be finalized by then. So we have some flexibility in terms of how, when we meet in March. We haven't done the CPC yet, but partially that's because Lisa Sauvé, as Charlie noted, is still reconciling what the CPC actually has to spend. And until that happens, there's not much point in us voting on any CPC articles or their budget. So I would say we can aim for the third Wednesday in March as we do. Let me see when that is exactly. That would be
March 16th.
16th.
Yeah, the 16th. If that works for everybody, the day before St. Patrick's Day, I would suggest we schedule our meeting for then and wait and see if there's anything urgent that comes up in the meantime. Not anticipating at this point. Does anybody have an issue with March 16th?
It's fine.
Okay, let's tentatively say March 16th. Does anybody have any other new business? Nor do I.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Stephen.
Good night.
I
Night,
need a
everybody.
second, please.
Second. Aye.
All those in favor? Bye.
No.
Bye.
Bye.
Say
All
bye.
those in favor say bye. Okay.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
So
Good
long.
job, Fred.
Thank you. Bye.
As
Good night.
always.